And thank you all for being here. We're so pleased to have you at today's discussion on lessons learned in the new application of OpenET for water data reporting in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. I'm Tara Moran. I'm CEO of the California Water Data Consortium. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the consortium, we're an independent nonprofit organization created by a partnership of state agencies and others to ensure that we have the best possible information about our state's water and ecological data and resources so that we can make decisions that will allow California to continue to prosper in the face of unprecedented climate challenges. We do this by bringing people and institutions together to exchange ideas, synthesize information, and design new ways to share data. We conduct research, host panels and webinars like this one, and communicate across the field to build a resilient, prosperous future. So last month, we tried our first ever panel discussion during a Data for Lunch, and it was such a huge success that we decided to do it again. So I'm very pleased to be joined here today by an incredible group of individuals who have been involved in developing and implementing an alternative compliance plan in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And they are going to collectively orient us to that process. And then we're going to sort of hear from them as they jointly explore questions like what's needed to succeed in adopting new water data reporting systems? What are we learning from OpenET in the Delta, and what can we sort of anticipate as next steps moving forward? So we're very fortunate to have Jay Ziegler, the State Water Resources Control Board Delta Water Master, with us here today. So in addition to setting the stage for today's introduction, he is also going to introduce us to our other panelists who are joining us here today. He's also going to moderate the discussion that we hope to have both amongst the panelists, but also with all of you. We are planning to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. As you do so, you're going to be asked to direct your Q&A to a specific individual. Please direct it to Amanda Miller, and then we'll be sharing it with the group at large. And so up to this point in time, as I've been talking about the consortium, I've been talking about the California Water Data Consortium. Our panelists are going to be talking about a different consortium that's been formed as part of this work called the Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium. We'll do our best to differentiate the two, but if our panelists use the term consortium, more likely than not, they'll be referring to the Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium. And so with that, I would like to introduce Jay just briefly. Amanda will drop a link to our event page into the chat. You'll find our full speaker bios there, as well as an overview that's been provided on the Delta ACP. And so with that, very excited to have you joining us here today, Jay. As I mentioned, Jay is the Delta Water Master. He was appointed earlier this year for a 4-year term. And in his role as the Delta Water Master, he's responsible for administering water rights within the Delta and Suisun Marsh. He's also responsible for advising the board and the Delta Stewardship Council on water rights, water quality, habitat, and land use issues. And so with that, over to you, Jay.
Tara, thank you for that. Thanks for the opportunity to have this discussion today with you all. I'm particularly excited about this panel that really brought an incredible breakthrough in water data reporting together across the legal delta. And I want to brag on the consortium for just a moment too. That is your big consortium, the California Water Data Consortium. And in my prior life at the Nature Conservancy, we were a very active supporter and sponsor of legislation AB 1755 and other water data breakthroughs in the policy process. And to not put too much pressure on you, I think that the consortium is absolutely critical in helping all of us find a way to get to a better balanced water budget for all beneficial uses, for people, for agriculture, and for recreation and the environment across California. So I thank you for the work that you and your team do every day, because if there's one thing I'm optimistic about, it is that data is going to lead us to better water management decisions in California. And so with that, let me introduce this panel quickly, and then I'm going to give you just kind of a quick orientation to what we're going to be talking about. Joined here today by Brett Baker, an attorney with Nomalini, Grilly, and McDaniel, and also a principal advisor to the Central Delta Water District, which was absolutely critical in the efforts to both form and implement the deltaacp.com that we're going to be talking about today. My colleague at the state board here, Lindsay Kameyer, the Senior Water Resource Control Engineer in the Drought Planning Unit at the state board today, was the principal engineer on the inside and the architect in integrating the board's ERIM system with deltaacp.com. And so it brings a really invaluable perspective at how we meaningfully link data breakthroughs with the regulatory framework at the board for actually reviewing and analyzing and making regulatory decisions around that data. And finally, a longtime friend of mine, Maurice Hall, who's here not just as my friend, but as the, I would really say, a co-founder of OpenET and the interim executive director of OpenET today, and a senior climate advisor for resilient water systems at the Environmental Defense Fund. So thank you all for joining me in this discussion. And I want to just kind of set the scene here a little bit in thinking about the Delta. The Delta is a 750,000 acre region in the heart of California. As you look at the image on the left, it really kind of looks like a heart. It's got the arteries, veins, capillaries that really show what the Delta is today. It is a network of 56 named islands, approaching 200 actual islands throughout this area. The area on the right, taking a kind of zooming back out, you can almost imagine what the Delta used to be, which was a giant marsh. And beginning at the gold rush era, we began to reclaim it and make it a network of waterways in which we try to mimic the continuing healthy estuary conditions necessary and also to protect water quality in the interests of all Californians. And so with that in mind, as a series of laws emerged on water data reporting, first directly affecting the Delta and the Delta Reform Act, then moving on to data reporting requirements in Senate Bill 88, the Delta Water Master's position kind of became increasingly focused around how we develop reliable, consistent, accessible data for all stakeholders to understand water use in the Delta. And I want to just take a moment to thank NASA, Desert Research Institute, the Central Delta Water Agency, the South Delta Water Agency, Habitat 7, the OpenET entity itself, Maurice, the state board for its investment in this work, and the California Water Data Consortium for bringing a real cross-check as we're going through the process. And I just want to also give credit to my predecessor, Michael George, who got this process rolling and who really, in beginning in 2017, developed the Water Data Experimental Consortium in the Delta to bring all stakeholders, anyone that had an interest, from NASA to a Delta farmer, together to really talk about how we would actually get better data about actual water usage in the Delta. And I'm pleased to say in my Nature Conservancy role, we were testing some gauging efforts in the Delta, and they proved inherently unreliable. We find that gauging today to remain unreliable, inconsistent, and have just really relied on this consortium to take us forward in finding the most reliable, feasible, and accessible way to present data that really shows an actual place of usage or tied to a point of diversion in the system. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in California. So I am so incredibly indebted to this partnership and this work effort to keep the continuing focus on OpenET and how we develop software, not just in the Delta, but beyond, for just an incredible view of how we actually delineate a close to real-time water budget in the Delta, again, to better manage water for all beneficial uses. And So that is just critically important. And thanks again to this group for this effort. So building on the OpenET platform, what you're seeing now is actually the results of all of these stakeholders' input and the efforts of the Central Delta, South Delta, North Delta water agencies working together to migrate data reporting onto a singular platform where we can better understand localized place of use. And again, there are 2,392 points of diversion throughout the Delta, and each one of those is mapped to a place of use. And so that's the scale that we're talking about here. It's very exciting. And what this group is largely responsible for is in its first year of implementation, getting to an 80% reporting of the all water users on a singular data platform, so we can really see and analyze data in one place. And that is just such an important breakthrough. So thank you to this group. And Brett, I'd like to turn to you. You're one of the early architects in this effort. And can you give us a bit of insight just on kind of how we got to this point and what the role of the Delta Reform Act in kind of getting that started?
Thank you, Jay. I'd be glad to. Appreciate the introduction and the kind of overview of the Delta and what we've been dealing with and hydrologically and just legally and regulatorily for reporting. So yeah, my involvement in reporting water use in the Delta began back in 2009, shortly after the passage of the Delta Reform Act. And for the first time in our state's history, we required that diverters within the legal Delta report their diversion and use of water. And you'll have to forgive me, this conversation is a bit like the water in the Delta. It sloshes back and forth and comes back around again. So we kind of end up where we started in a little bit of this, and we were very fortuitous to fit almost perfectly within what OpenET does and how that fits into the management of the state water project and the conditions in the Delta, particularly water quality and consumptive use. So after the Reform Act in 2009, like I said, local diverters, small pipes, every pipe, as we understood the legislation, had to file a report, register and file a report for their figures of diversion and use within the Delta. And so that water, that data was, a big complaint and question we always got from our farmers was, where is this data going? How is this data going to be used? For us, it was a one, we were trying to comply with the regulation. We weren't trying to solve everybody's water issues in the state of California. So we started out, we used the IRTC method. We created a simple spreadsheet based on crop type and acreage. We could plug in, say, 100 acres of corn. We incorporated localized weather data. We purchased, I refer to we, I use the royal term we a lot here. I'm going to be referring to the Central and South Delta water agencies. So we used that spreadsheet, the Cal Poly data, localized weather data, incorporated that, and then made a few assumptions based on irrigation type, and we would extrapolate from that a consumptive use figure and also an applied water figure, a diverted amount diverted figure. And we went about doing that for several years. That reporting was required triannually. Every 3 years, we'd file some reports, ask our farmers, what crops did you have? And we crunched the numbers, and we would also distribute the spreadsheet to our farmers, and they could do it themselves. Other folks in the Delta, in the North and the Western Delta, adopted this method, and we operated under, after SB 88, we operated under a measurement method. We had DAMP, which is the Delta Area Measurement Method. So we would request an extension of time each year, and do our hydrological conditions and the difficulties we found in metering these diversions. We purchased and I maintained and operated about 5 or 6 physical measuring devices, mostly mace meters, mostly ultrasonic meters. We did build a weir And we always found that data was less than trustworthy, less than accurate, and it had a lot of gaps, had a lot of issues. And it was expensive data to get, actually. If you were to actually try and do that on an individual basis, you had to have somebody maintaining it and managing that data. And so when Michael began the consortium, we got together, we began to discuss a better way to go about this. And it all came back to recognizing and realizing that consumptive use in the Delta is really the relevant measure of water loss on a system-wide basis. And that has been readily recognized and agreed to for the last 50, 60 years in this state. That's how we calculate Delta outflow. Consumptive use is because of the unique hydrology of the Delta is relevant. We don't use it goes back into the channel and percolates back into the groundwater. The consumptive use represents the vast majority, like 99.999% of water use in the Delta. There's very little storage. Most of our farmers are continually operating and maintaining drainage to keep an oxygenated root zone so they can make productive use of their land and the water that comes in here. And so we began to develop this alternative compliance program, which was another route in the SB 88 regulations that allowed for a more long-term compliance strategy. And so that's what we've done. And I think I'll probably leave it off here, and we'll get back to some of the more of the details of what we did in Delta ACP, but that's kind of how we arrived at where we're at now. And Lindsay, I think, can probably take it from here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that overview, Brett. I joined the Water Board in 2019, so kind of came in a little bit at the tail end of this whole project that happened. The Delta Measurement Experimentation Consortium started meeting in 2016 to address these issues that were found related to diversion measurement using metering devices. So they spent 3 years testing over 19 devices, and they all found that they fell short of the regulatory requirements, or most of them were. So we then decided to move forward with, well, what are we going to do for most of the legal delta that needs to comply with this regulation? And in October of 2019, decided to move forward with using the OpenET as the data that would provide the alternative compliance for the legal delta. So with that, we had a presentation from OpenET. We did some exploration as to what was happening with their platform, and we really happened to have a great synergy in timelines. So, I'd spent years doing this testing. We're looking around for other resources, and OpenET had been developing and was getting near ready to publish the data, make it public, and be used for folks throughout the Western United States. So it really happened to be a great time for us to need those resources. And with that, I was going to pass it over to Maurice to talk a little bit more about OpenET and the development of OpenET.
Hello there, folks. Great to see a lot of names anyway of people that I know, and I really appreciate the Water Data Consortium and Jay for inviting me to participate here and talk about this project that I'm obviously very excited about and invested in. I think it's important to step back a little bit and look at this technology and this science a bit. And while OpenET or even satellite-based ET data, evapotranspiration data, may be fairly new to many of you, and certainly to many in the water community, the science behind this has been in development for decades. Back when I was in grad school in the early 1990s at Colorado State, there were people working in the office with me doing analysis based on Landsat imagery to estimate ET, and it was actually pretty good then. And over the years, a whole ecosystem of scientists and hundreds of PhD students and graduate students have been working and refining the methods, testing them in different places. Lots of work in the cooperative extension in different states, et cetera, and in the Agricultural Research Service and other places, working to improve this data. And so this concept and the basic science behind it is actually pretty sound. And certainly it's not perfect. There's errors, and we're trying to get a better handle on what those errors are and what the sources of them are, et cetera. But the science is actually well tested, and the data has been provided for different uses throughout the years. What OpenET has done, and is really our sort of our central mission, is to standardize the way these models are done, systemize the process, and automate it. And through using cloud computing capacity, and in this case, it's Google's Earth Engine, and this is the amazing ability to process huge amounts of data, spatially accurate data very quickly, is enormous. And can't thank Google Earth Engine enough for the capacity that they brought and the help that they brought in helping us figure out how to do this. But the OpenET project did that, and then used a top-notch web interface and supporting infrastructure around that to put this data in the hands of a wide variety of users at very low cost, and so far free to most users, so that we can all be looking at the same data, understanding where that data came from, and being transparent about how those calculations are made. It may not be easy to dig into that, but that documentation is very thorough, and that's an important part of what we're doing. And so what this has done, in addition to what you're hearing about today in the data, is across the Western US, and now the data is publicly available on the web interface for 17 Western states, is there's a whole ecosystem of work doing to rapidly advance the science and to ingest this data into decision-making in ways that it hasn't been available. It's important to point out that you could get this data previously, but you would have to hire a consultant, and there's a number of good consultants doing great work in this out there, or a university group, some great work that's been done, but it was pretty expensive to get hold of. And so sometimes it was accessible, sometimes you could get it, but OpenET puts it out there, rapidly updates it over time, and puts it in the hands of people for lots of decision making. Just really quickly, to bring back to the Delta connection, we began this effort of sort of pulling all this science together and begin building the OpenET platform about 8 years ago. And one of the first people outside the ET data space that I talked to was Michael George, the previous Delta Water Master. And given the work that they've been doing with this Delta Measurement Consortium, he immediately saw the value of OpenET and really encouraged us, and in particular encouraged us to keep an eye on this ensemble idea, because they were testing different methods and finding that different methods, different models gave different results. And so he really emphasized this ensemble method that really became part of our inner way of working, to use the different models that have been developed in different settings for different particular uses, and then comparing those models quickly and easily. And now OpenET provides the data, the estimates from 6 different algorithms, six different models. And then the ensemble process was very thoroughly thought out to get rid of outliers, models that really just don't make sense, or that they're giving estimates in a particular situation that are way out of line with the other models, and pulling an ensemble value together. And our testing so far, and when we've completed now 2 of the most extensive intercomparison studies of different methods, and our testing so far shows that the ensemble estimate works best across agricultural areas in the West. And I've probably gone longer than Jay wanted, so I'll pause and.
Well, that's a great explanation of the science, Maurice, and I want to thank you for that, because I think it's really important that people kind of understand sort of the core functional reliability that we have in our consumptive use reporting index here on and reliant really on the OpenET model. And then so you've got an OpenET data set. We have the deltaacp.com, and then to make it relevant within the state board here, we have the RMS system. So there are those points of integration. I wonder, Brett, if you and Lindsay could give some discussion to, all of this data isn't really valuable unless there's a user interface that is workable, understandable, and then ultimately accessible to everybody interested in the data. And so to have that happen, we've got to have web integration between OpenET and deltaacp.com, and then it's also got to link to the statewide RMS system. And maybe turning to you first, Lindsay, as you looked at the challenges from the state board to the rest of the Delta, and I'm curious, and you can just kind of talk about your approach of how we actually got all of this the data in a digitally compatible format across those platforms.
Yeah, definitely. Required a lot of software engineers, a lot of smart people to make this all happen. So we had to develop a website, which is the deltaacp.com, and that provided, and that was financed, supported by Central Delta and South Delta Water Agency, the regulated community that, was providing us this data. And this allowed us the opportunity to also try to innovate a little bit and think about, well, what do the Delta users specifically need to report on? Because if anyone has filed an annual water rights report, it is very extensive. It takes a long time. So since we were just having a few folks in a specific area report, we were able to help work on simplifying the form, making it easier, trying to autofill things. And an important part of that was also autofilling the OpenET data for every user. And that required coordination between both the Delta ACP website, the Desert Research Institute for querying the actual shape files, and then sending those to OpenET, retrieving that data and autofilling it and making it uneditable. So that way we had great confidence about the data that we were getting was in fact the true shapefile for that specific area. And as you mentioned before, Jay, a huge lift in this was in fact the shapefiles, creating these specific places on planet Earth that divert water from this channel to this specific location. And that is something that the State Water Board has not had previously. So that was a huge effort by Brett. I'm sure he is tired of ever looking at the Esri user interface and drawing shapefiles, but he did a fantastic job to make sure that we didn't have overlap between places, that we were designating the correct areas to make sure that we could accurately query OpenET and get correct information for these specific areas. So, in order, we created that website, we updated the user interface to make it more friendly and easier for folks to use. We had these digitized shapefiles, and all that also required then coordination as well with the Water Board's Division of Information Technology and getting the data from the Delta ACP website into our system. So it was a big effort to make sure that all of those pieces talked together and worked correctly, but we were able to do it with a lot of dedication from the folks here today, as well as folks not on this call. This system, though, that we have, the report management system, RMS, is outdated, a little clunky to work with, and doesn't really quite serve our needs for a modern California water data network. So we're actually in the process of updating our water rights database through an effort called Upward, and are very excited to update our water rights database, have a better way to store data, have a better way to communicate, and really move us into the next century of water data. And not just being able to ingest better water data, but also communicate that back out to the public, since it is a public trust resource. We not only want to collect better water data, we also want to be able to share that and have everyone have access to that. And I know Brett is actually one of the one of the members of the public helping to consult for the Upward project and providing feedback on this program. So I wasn't sure, Brett, if you wanted to mention anything about being involved in that user group for Upward. And you're still on mute.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
that. So yeah, be happy to. So I just want to touch on a few things first. So when Michael and I when we first started talking about this and discussing this, we noticed value in a lot of different places as we were conceptualizing where we were going to go with DACP. One of the first things that Michael, I think, saw value in was the geospatial definition of a place of use. Having that mapped out, we used ArcGIS, Esri, kind of the global standard for mapping on the globe. So we began associating these places of use with these statement numbers. And so when you go plow new ground, which we were doing, sometimes you have to knock down a few old dead stumps. And so there were kind of these relics in the system. As this regulation came down, people had different ideas about why you should register a statement number. Do you need to register a statement number for each APN assessor parcel that you own? Do you need to register a statement number for each pipe that delivers water to that parcel or any parcel that it may deliver water to? So we kind of had to start with by making a few assumptions and doing a few things in associating these places of use with their points of diversion. And so we consolidated some of them where there were multiple points of diversion that might serve overlapping places of use. We would say, okay, there's 4 fields there and 3 pipes. Let's just make one large place of use. So we still have things that are not maybe refined perfectly, but they give us a large picture. The Delta, fortunately, we're dealing in a defined universe here. There's that statutory 700 something thousand acres of Delta that we were dealing with. So that was kind of the first deal. One of the other unique aspects of the hydrology here is that there's always water in the channel. So it's not a matter of, for us, generally speaking, we're not concerned with quantity used so much as the quality of the water in the channel. But having said that, you can grow the same crop of corn on 2 disparate places of Delta ground and irrigate one starting in June and finish in September or August or October, and you may have another piece of ground yield the same amount of corn that you might not have to irrigate at all, just due to the localized hydrology. So this idea that we were going to capture what we felt was relevant. We had been, like I said, utilizing the ITRC method. And when we looked at the ensemble approach in OpenET, we felt a great degree of confidence in what they were doing, because what we had been reporting fit right within the confidence interval and was actually one of the equations in the ensemble. And so we felt a certain amount of degree of confidence in hitching our wagon to OpenET. And just to be clear, we're just the tag-alongs. We're really on looking from the shoulders of giants here. We're very thankful to have be able to work with bona fide rocket scientists on this stuff, because it's simple for us conceptually as Delta farmers and water users in the Delta, because we've been here, we understand this hydrology, but it is complex. And so we wanted to try to do something that was simple enough for our water users. I joke with them sometimes. I said, when we built Delta ACP, our goal was to build it so that a chimpanzee could use it, and I think we've succeeded in that. And I get sometimes a smile, sometimes a little snark from my farmers when I say that to them. But no, in fixing the data, we kept the integrity of the data alive, because when we handed out that spreadsheet, we never really knew what was going to end up in the report that ended up in RMS. And nothing was more frustrating than to see people misuse or misrepresent things that were going on on the ground, and then crediting your spreadsheet for it. So yeah, we were able to preserve the integrity. I think the uniformity of the data is another thing. you know, when we would go back and look at, we had curtailments in the past, we had informational orders that came out of the state board, and we would try and comply with them. We'd go back and look at some of these reports that had been filed by our users and different users, and they would be in gallons per minute. At one point in time, there was you could comply with SB 88 using a bucket and a stopwatch. Those are just relics of things that we kind of had to get out of the way and shed ourselves of to as we move forward. And I think as we looked at Michael, as we looked at it, we saw value in multiple places. And I think that it's the uniformity of the data, it's the timeliness of the data, the integrity of the data, the transparency of the data. You can go verify, well, you can go back and see, is this the actual shape that, you know, was used, and is this the actual data that came out of OpenET? So, yeah, it was a very interesting thing. And on the other end, we had these farmers, these end users in mind. And like I said, we wanted to make this as clear and understandable to them to get their buy-in, because if they don't buy in, then we're not doing anything special at all. And so, yeah, our farmers were very relieved to know that we were taking publicly available data and providing that. We weren't making them, you know, swear on a stack of Bibles that they measured this drop to within plus or minus 10% of who knows what. And so it kind of relieved a lot of stress and added a lot of value. And I think that's one of the things that I think this can add value. For us, we were just, like I said, trying to solve a regulatory requirement. We wanted to do one thing, was we wanted to avoid installing physical measuring devices on each and every diversion in Delta, not only to get bad data, but to avoid the costs and the maintenance of doing so. And we achieved that. We feel that we have achieved that. We've given a solid deliverable, and I think it's actually better for everybody, right? It's better for the Delta guys. We're hoping it's better for the state in planning and operating their system. And, you know, while consumptive use may not be the relevant measure everywhere in California, it certainly is relevant everywhere in California. And so I think that there is value to having this data, not only in the Delta, but throughout our state. So, yeah, I'll leave it there for right now.
Yeah, Brett, I think that's really helpful, and I guess I am most excited about how we're actually getting to really an open and transparent water budget in the Delta, to really understand, again, both localized and Delta-wide consumptive use. And to talk maybe just a second about the Delta Water Experimental Consortium. It's the work of the consortia really did look at all of the impediments and the cost factors. And I think a conservative estimate with respect to gauge deployment in the Delta is that it would cost roughly $10,000 plus to install and monitor the gauges, for which we have found roughly 3-year reliability. And so, on an say a Delta island has 50 points of diversion, that actually means about a $500,000 upfront investment. And so that's the scale of what we're talking about in terms of affordability. And then furthermore, I think what the Office of the Delta Water Master was most concerned about was reliability of that data. And we are continuing to see, among a number of reporters that are still using gauges, just inconsistency in the data, breakdowns in the gauging. So we have lapses in when the gauge data is able to be reported. And so we still have kind of a default to the OpenET based data. But even more important, this Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium continues to work on it each day. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow among all stakeholders to, again, kind of think about the scope of experiments that we're looking at. So tailwater pumping, and what does that mean as an element of a water budget for a Delta island? Net channel depletion, how much water around an island is actually, or how much water is restored to channels in a systematic analysis around that island. Looking at groundwater, surface water interaction. As Brett noted, there are places in the Delta where corn is grown with literally no irrigation and others where it needs to be irrigated. And so to better understand the differentials in groundwater, surface water action, and applied water. We're also, Maurice can probably talk about this a bit as well. We're getting more and more sophisticated in the design to look at to separate an index for precipitation. And so to just further refinements across the board through the Delta Measurement Experimental Consortium, and Metropolitan Water District has been a leading supporter, really deeply engaged in this effort. And I thank them for their investment of science to really help us in the islands that Metropolitan owns in the Delta. Similarly, Department of Water Resources looking at a lot of experiments around to further refine our methodologies, get better and better real-time data in the use of ET on consumptive use. So all of that I think is just fundamentally exciting, and just we're getting to a better and better picture of consumptive use across the Delta through this OpenET reporting. I wonder, Brett, maybe just in thinking about kind of where we are today, do you have a sense, certainly in the Delta, but among broader stakeholders, that we are getting a deeper consensus on water budget dynamics in the Delta?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it requires, a little bit of refreshing and seeing, openness to being, developing a new understanding of what's going on. I did recently have conversation with an engineer from MBK, and I believe they work for Metropolitan here in the Delta, and we went over what we were doing and took a look at it. And he said, "Wow, it'd been a couple of years since I've really looked at OpenET." And when we went and took a look, you can go in and see which equations are employed in the ensemble approach. He said, "Wow, this is a lot different than when I looked at it 5 years ago." So as Maurice stated, there is no perfect. We definitely recognize that individually, and as an organization in our Delta here, there is no perfect. But yeah, we really think that this is getting closer to it. We're getting better information all the time, and we're improving. Incremental improvement is what we can ask of ourselves. And I think that, yeah, as we can learn how to use this tool more effectively, we can make better, more informed decisions based on better data. And I think that's a goal. We joke or quip in the Delta that we should draw one polygon around the entire Delta, and then we should, incorporate that into how we make our operational decisions for the projects. But yeah, no, I think that this is getting more useful data, and as we've taken retrospective looks at data, and I've seen folks do it for various different reasons, trying to do economic analysis of drought impacts in the Delta or things of that nature. But as we look back and kind of look at the data that we've had to deal with in the past, it's almost embarrassing that's what we're making decisions based on, as if you're trying to be a real scientist or a real impartial observer. So yeah, no, I think that is one of the things that is the uniformity and the usefulness of it is critical, or a lot of the value there.
Right, great. Well, I'd like to encourage our audience also to offer up questions on issues that we may be talking about, anything you want additional information, or if you have resources to share with us as well, please to put those in the chat today, and we'll try to get to that. I think what I would really like to hear from each of you, and again, I kind of want to give this context that I feel like what we have, our breakthrough here is that we're developing more accurate data, better real-time understanding of flow dynamics, water usage, consumptive use in the Delta. We're getting, and that data is just continuing to improve and give us just a better understanding of real-time Delta hydrology, and that we just need to keep on this course and really continue to set an example of a truly collaborative reporting enterprise that is giving us the most valuable data for decision making. What I would like to hear really from each of the panelists is where we go next. What is the value of OpenET in the Delta and beyond, and what are the next steps that you see us taking here? And I guess one important one that I want to let the audience be aware of is, well, our pilot in 22 on water year 22 reporting was focused on the reporting of riparian water rights usage, riparian rights associated usage. For the water year 23, we're actually integrating reporting of all rights, riparian and appropriative rights in the Delta on a singular platform. And again, our aspiration here and my belief is that we'll actually get to have more than 90% of water users in the Delta reporting on this platform for water year 23. So again, I'm very excited about the ease of use, the reliability of the data, and the continued depth of questions and understanding about OpenET, what it's telling us about water use in the Delta. But Maurice, maybe let me turn to you first and just kind of talking about OpenET in the Delta and beyond, and what are your aspirations for seeing the continued development of OpenET and its application?
Yeah, thanks a bunch. A couple of points I'd like to make. One is really give credit to the Delta water users in stepping forward. Everyone is nervous about a new way of measurement, a new meter, a new change meter brands, and people get nervous about that, and it's understandable. Of course, tend to like something when it gives you the answer you want. You tend to be a little more skeptical if it gives you an answer you don't want. But the farmers in the Delta, the water agencies, really took a step forward, a little bit nervously, I'm sure. I had a few very interesting and meetings in the Delta talking about what OpenET was doing and opening up, adding to the transparency, and recognizing that maybe it's going to give you the answer you think you want, and maybe it's not. And so a real credit to them for stepping forward. And in the development of OpenET, we had about 10 to a dozen different end use cases who partnered with us, gave us feedback on the model and the interface. And we have a group of farmers in Kremling, Colorado, in the Kremling area of Colorado, who are working to implement conservation measures on their lands to address the issues in the Colorado River Basin and across the West. Those that are willing to step forward, accept the transparency that it gives, and undoubtedly some scrutiny, are really important. To the point of the Delta, it's critical to recognize that it's a very unique hydrology, and OpenET and ET generally is only one component of the flow in a water budget. It's a big one in most cases, but in my history in engineering, practically every water resource issue I dealt with, we had to make some estimate of ET, and often it was a pretty rough guess. But when you can get that ET measurement, it clarifies all the other pieces of the puzzle. So if you can get an ET measurement that you have confidence in, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 20%, that really reduces the uncertainty in the other parts of the water balance, which gets really important in other parts of the state where the hydrology is different, and all those other flow components make a lot of difference. Part of our, I'm leading at the moment the OpenET nonprofit, OpenET Inc., and we're really one of our core efforts is to make sure this data is ingested and used appropriately. And so I've heard some concerns about using OpenET to report water use in other parts of the states. It almost certainly doesn't make sense in most places to just use OpenET for that reporting. That said, it will certainly help you better understand that water budget. I'll pause and give Brett and others a chance to respond.
Thank you.
Brett or Lindsay?
I'll go. Yeah, where we go from here, we're going to continue to refine what we've done and improve upon what we've done. We are going to, as Jay mentioned, incorporate license reporting into the platform. So that way we can have more of a wraparound with any sort of other licensed water use that might be used in the Delta, and try and have a one-stop shop for all of our users to comply with the regulations and the reporting requirements. Other than that, I'm hoping to go on vacation some point in time here in the near future, because this has been a monumental lift, and we do have further to go. We do have improvements. We've been very fortunate to work with a very talented group of web designers and folks that have tackled, and I promised I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to go back on that. The audacious goal we had set for ourselves, and it's kind of signing into a black box, in that the receiving end, what we built was an API, which I've learned is a website that talks to other websites. So it goes to OpenET, retrieves this data, and then talks to RMS and files a report. And so, as we continue to improve, I think one thing that I'm really looking forward to is helping improve the infrastructure on the receiving end at the state board, in that upward effort, and building a IT infrastructure there that can handle what we're trying to do. And as I think as we move forward, geospatially relating water use to an area is going to be critical. And yeah, having an ability to ingest that on the side of the regulatory community is going to be important. So I hope to engage in that. And yeah, hopefully we'll continue doing what we do here in the Delta.
Lindsay?
I'll go.
Brett,
I'll go
that's great.
real quick.
Okay.
So I'm obviously very excited for Delta ACP, but I'm really interested in how we're going to use OpenET data for future analyses, especially with how we as humans manage water and what we can do to change our consumptive water use. We're doing experiments like that in the legal Delta for these past couple of years, saying, hey, if we plant a different crop, what will that change? If we deficit irrigate, what will that change for the ET that we're getting? And I think that having that data readily available from OpenET for every single parcel across California, for having that data, currently goes back to 2016. I know there are plans to make it go back further, is just going to be an invaluable resource, because we have so many questions about how to manage our water that I'm really excited to see just have this great data base available, and all the new questions we'll have, all the new research questions we'll have, and how we have this great rich data set to help us address those questions and come to a better understanding of how to manage water. So excited for everything that we will continue to do in the future with OpenET, and that we have this resource.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. And I feel like this has just been such an amazing moment in terms of an ability to take the OpenET experiment in the Delta, your knowledge of and interactions with Brett and the user community, and as we think about how to make Upward as accessible as possible and wider, more generally diversion-based reporting across the state. So I'm excited in the next round of your work here and how you integrate this this experience we've had in the Delta. I think we've got time for just a few questions here, but we will ensure that we get answers to all questions in the chat. I'm really delighted to see a number of you really talk about the exciting collaboration that this process is really built upon, and that is indeed the foundation. And a specific question that I can answer with regard to the Delta Measuring Experimental Consortium, we meet at noon tomorrow, and we'll put that information into the chat today so that you all can, those that are interested. This discussion, again, is open to all comers, from NASA ET experts, OpenET, Habitat 7, the Delta Water community, and the statewide academic, applied water user communities very actively involved in these discussions. So it's really an open roundtable that meets quarterly to help us, again, refine experiments and share data about better understanding everything we can apply to integrate our understanding and depth of knowledge about OpenET and how OpenET connects with direct diversion monitoring, how it connects with other indices, including on the ground ET metrics to actually continue to refine the data. So let me just take a couple, Maurice, these may well go to you in thinking about what is the success criteria for the ensemble methodology as you developed it, and are there plans at OpenET to expand the data ensemble application in the Central Valley and beyond?
Yeah, just real quickly, the initial models were selected based on sort of the broadness of their use and the level of documentation of the models in the historical record. The ensemble method, we've had a huge amount of effort around the ensemble, how to go through the process of selecting the outliers and doing it automatically over large areas and huge data sets very quickly, and selecting those that are combined to get the ensemble. There's a great documentation of that in a couple of articles, publications, and we can provide the reference, the link to those afterwards to the participants. And in fact, we have just learned that a next phase in our intercomparison study, which discusses this topic on the ensemble directly, has just been accepted in Nature Water, and we expect to see that early next year, published early next year. Really excited about that. With respect to expansion to other parts of the Central Valley and the West, the data is now currently available through the web interface and the application program interface that Brett mentioned for 17 Western states. And so that data is available, and people are using it in Sigma implementation and developing their water balances and groundwater sustainability plans in California. And they're using it in the Colorado River Basin and the Upper Basin to measure conservation savings from different implementation, different projects, et cetera. So the data is there, and we are excited to work with people to help to use it in different ways and to make sure that the science is interpreted correctly and appropriately used. Thank you.
Maurice, that's great. As I look at the questions, I also am looking at the clock, and I think we have hit our time. Tara, is that correct? So thank you all for having this discussion. And as I see questions continue to come into the queue here, I am just delighted to have had this chance to really stand on the shoulders of this group and the really active efforts of my predecessor, Michael George, in staying with a 5-year process to develop this data reporting platform. And that 5-year process brought everyone along to a depth of understanding, a feel of being listened to, a feel of, okay, actually being part of a process that we can all benefit from, and especially if we design it together. And so my hat is off again to my predecessor, Michael George, and this group as leaders that really brought this data reporting platform together. And it's exciting to be here to share this with you. And Tara, thank you for all the work of the Data Consortium and really not to put too much pressure on you all, but I think the future of California in experiencing this increasing variability in precipitation from one year to the next and how we even it all out is ultimately going to rely on the development and integration of consistently better data to help all of us understand the need for more flexible and science-based decision making about water. So thank you to the consortium here, and thank you Maurice, thank you Lindsay, thank you Brett for your amazing work in bringing the Delta ACP reporting platform forward.
Well, likewise, thank you, Jay, for your role and for bringing this amazing group together today. Thank you all for being here. What a fantastic discussion. And thank you to all our panelists. A recording of today's discussion will be available on our website later, either this week or early next week. Amanda dropped a link into the chat where you can locate that. Also, if you're not subscribed to our listserv, please do so. That's where you'll get a notification when it is published. And again, just huge thank you to all of you for being here and for the amazing discussion. I think it's collaborations like this that are so important for us moving forward as we move into this, transitioning climate landscape that we're experiencing. So thank you, and happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.